Hello and welcome to the European Report. Here we are in the European Parliament, in the heart of the European Union, and in today's programme we're discussing the state of the Middle East peace process and can US President Donald Trump and his administration revive the Middle East peace process. And in today's programme I'm joined by Tomas Sandell, the founder and director of the European Coalition for Israel, Anders Vistisen, MEP from Denmark and also part of the Conservative and Reformist group. So welcome to the programme. And also Joël Rubinfeld, the president of the Belgian League against anti-Semitism. So welcome to the programme. Tomas, I'll start off the programme with you because I know that you have contacts with the US administration. In terms of policy towards the Middle East, what policy is Donald Trump and his administration doing that's different from his predecessor, President Obama, in trying to bring about peace in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians?
Yeah, obviously in Europe, President Trump doesn't get a lot of praise, but I think after having completed his first trip to the Middle East, I think we owe him some recognition. I'm not going to comment on the European leg of the trip, but basically what he did during those few days in the Middle East was to bring together friends and allies of the United States, and one may say also of Europe to some extent, and to build a bridge which we always knew was there between the Gulf states and Israel, and to strengthen that and even dare to have a vision on how this cooperation could be strengthened. And I think on that note, obviously there are many details, and not at least to say the deal they made with Saudi Arabia that can be questioned and needs to be discussed. But by and large, I think he did infuse positive energy into the region to those who are willing to at least try to start walking on a path towards peace.
And Anders, it's great to have you on the programme. The first time you've been on the European Report's an absolute pleasure. Can you share a little bit with our viewers, a little bit about your background and how you became involved in politics, representing your constituency in Denmark, but also standing up for Israel in this parliament?
As you said, I'm elected in Denmark from the Danish People's Party, and we have a long-standing tradition of standing with Israel in a Danish political context. And I was elected to the European Parliament in 2014, but now moved into the Foreign Affairs Committee and working quite closely with Mr. Belder from the Netherlands. So him and myself are sort of the spokespersons on the Israeli-Palestinian.
Fantastic.
We are solving that conflict together. And I had the somewhat mixed pleasure of having to negotiate the current resolution that was just passed in Strasbourg on the way to the two-state solution and the peace process in the Middle East on behalf of the ECR group, which was a very tough negotiation, but I dare say that we had a more positive outcome than we have had before in this House, and a better text than we maybe hoped before entering into negotiations. So I think at least that shifted a little bit the very negative connotations towards Israel that this House is very infamous for around the world, very rightly so. So that is sort of how I came to work with Israel here in this House.
When it comes down to Europe, particularly European institutions like the European Parliament, like the European Commission, there's a lot of skepticism, there's a lot of mistrust regarding Donald Trump as president, and it's clearly a departure from the policies of his predecessor, President Obama. In your opinion, do you think that President Trump can convince his so-called European allies of the course he's taking towards approaching the conflict in the Middle East?
I think we have to be honest. Most of Western Europe believe that Republicans are bad people. And then you can put the Trump sort of factor onto that. So I think if you poll Trump in Western Europe, he would poll like maybe 5% on a good day of the general public. In Eastern Europe, I think the view is a bit different. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that Trump is going to win any popularity contests in Europe. And we know also that Europe is taking a bit of a different stand on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I think actually for all parties, I think it's better to go with the quartet, where Europe is sort of under control, and with the regional partners. I think that is where we find the path to peace. It's very clear that the European Parliament and the European Commission have taken a very strange view to the peace process. Everyone knows that when there is a peace, every element have to go together. Settlements have to go to with Jerusalem, with compensation, with security for Israel, with guarantees for Israeli security from neighboring countries and so on and so forth. Europe tries to solve all of these issues sort of unilaterally, one by one. First by sort of from this house side recognizing a state of Palestine doesn't exist. So it is very difficult to see Europe being a constructive partner in peace. I think the thing that Europe can do is when a peace process is there, we'll probably provide a lot of the aid that the Palestinians are going to ask for. That is sort of normally our role, but I don't find it very realistically that we are going to be the driver or any meaningful partner in the real negotiations. I find Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and the US to be much more important pieces of this puzzle than Europe will ever claim to be.
Excellent. Thank you for your insight. Really appreciate that. And Joel, maybe you can give us your perspective on what you think are the major issues that are preventing a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Well, the former US administration, Obama administration, decided to follow the global trend, the European global trend. It was to put the pressure on the Israeli side. Now the new administration, Trump administration, decided to shift the pressure on the Palestinian side. And I think that's the first step, preliminary step to advance on the path of peace. That's the first thing. Seeing this conflict as a territorial conflict is only part of the picture, and I think it's accessory. We are facing in Israel and with its neighbors and with the Palestinians, we are facing an ideological conflict, not a territorial conflict. We saw that in the past, back to 48, 67, 2000 with the Camp David and Taba talks, 2007 with the proposal of Ehud Olmert. We saw that the Palestinian side never accepted, not about territorial concession, but the existence of a Jewish state next to them as a neighbor. So that's the basic issue. And when you see that on the Palestinian side, I'm not even speaking about Hamas TV, I'm speaking about the Palestinian Authority TV. On a daily basis, they are nurturing their kids to hate Israel, to hate the Jews, to hate the Christians also. When you look at the Palestinian TV, you understand that it's not about territories. It's not about Hebron, it's not about Jerusalem, it's not about Ramallah. It's about the fact that there is a non-Muslim country, entity in their midst. So we need to understand this. I think that the people who are sincerely supporting the Palestinian cause, and I support this also, I think that the Palestinian people deserve to have a state. That's not the issue. But when they are supporting blindly the Palestinian, I think they don't help the Palestinian, because they need to understand that there is two partners in those peace talks, Palestinians but Israelis. And you cannot ask to Israel to commit a suicide. You cannot ask. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. It was a test. It was on small level a test to see if the Palestinians are a grown people, politically speaking, and they are able to deal with self-determination. What happened since 2005? Gaza became a base from a missile launch pad. So you cannot ask from the Israeli part to withdraw from part of the disputed territories. Then it will be in the hands of Hamas. And Hamas is no different from the Islamic State. It's not different from Hezbollah. It's not different from Al-Qaeda. It's really a mistake to think that there is a bad terrorism like Al-Qaeda or Islamic State and a tolerable terrorism like Hamas or Hezbollah. Why? Because they are only killing Jews?
Absolutely, very, very good point. And Tomas, when we look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, don't we have to look at the kind of wider geostrategic developments that are taking place in the Middle East? And particularly in light of President Trump's recent visit to the Middle East, he decided to meet with the Saudis and reposition American foreign policy in terms of supporting the Sunnis in the Middle East, particularly Saudi Arabia, against the Iranians, which was the main foreign policy objective of President Obama. What do you think this this policy will have on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Yeah, it's. I mean, as we all know, Donald Trump is a gambler and a deal maker, and they have to take risks, and he is taking risks, and he is thinking, I think, in bold new patterns. Obviously, we have to be realistic. We are talking now about bridging the relations to the Gulf states, but looking at the whole picture, we know there is a Sunni-Shia divide, which is perhaps today much deeper than even an Israeli-Palestinian divide. And this is not going away anywhere. And as you rightly mentioned, the European approach for these last 5 years has been to empower Iran and to bring Iran back from the cold and basically enable them to continue with their evil schemes. So what we may see, of course, is a polarization in the Middle East, but perhaps a polarization where the attention is not on Israel or not even on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The intelligent question is of course to ask, who will be able to, what is the end game of that polarization in such a volatile region where Iran and their Gulf states really hate each other's guts. So whether peace between Israel and the Palestinians in that context is really achievable, that's a good question. But I don't think we should simplify or simply neglect or forget the Shia side when we try to build, try to make peace in the region.
Absolutely. And Anders, very much like your opinion on this one, because it seems to be when Europe takes a position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it seems to choose the maximum position of the Palestinian Authority, which is against Israeli security concerns. Do you think that with Donald Trump in power and new peace initiatives that Europe can get behind that? Or how can we reform European foreign policy in such an extent that we see that Europe decides to align itself with the one true democracy in the Middle East that shares the same values as Europe?
That's a very good question. I think we have to be realistic. I don't think the Palestinians is in a place where they can negotiate any credible peace. Hamas is controlling the Gaza Strip, and I'm not even sure that PLO have that much control over their own territories if they push the peace deal. So first of all, we have to bring the situation to a place where there is a basis for peace. And I think one element in that is to have the Arab neighbors pressure the Palestinians into understanding that this situation is not going to continue on. And there I think we have some pressure we can apply. Egypt is in a very fragile situation. President Sisi needs foreign support for his platform. I'm very much in favor of stability in Egypt. I think the new Egyptian regime is a much more credible, reliable partner, but we should also pressure them into pressuring their neighbors. At the same with the Sudanese, they are in a very fragile situation with the Syrian refugees coming in. We all know that they have closer links to Israel than they probably would admit publicly, and the Saudis also need us. So I think if we could have the neighbors make the Palestinians understand that their support is not endless, just in the back rooms, sort of informally, that would make the Palestinians realize that this free ride they're on cannot continue forever. And I think Trump's policies could also push in that direction. Mm-hmm. Trump's policies is a bit of a gamble. For instance, if he's seriously moving the embassy, which we don't know yet, to Jerusalem, that is a way of putting a press ball right on the Palestinians, saying, if you're not going to do anything, then we're just continuing to, enable Israel. And I think that could actually change the dynamic. It will change the dynamic. The question is if it will change it in a good way or in a bad way. There is a hope for the first, but a fear for the last.
So, Simon, if I might jump in here, and we haven't mentioned Abbas' sudden peace willingness to sit down, and we didn't hear this type of language for all these 10 years. All of a sudden, here comes Abbas, who said he will never sit down, and these are the preconditions. He said, I'm happy to sit down anytime, and it's exactly as you said. Of course, in this region, what they understand is not the soft diplomacy of the Europeans. They need big sticks. And it's really working the magic now. So I think from that perspective, the prospects for peace have never been as good as they are right now. And I think as a European, we should give credit to Donald Trump.
Very good. And, Joel, surely one of the major issues in the peace process is the fact that for the last 20 years, the Palestinian children have been fed a diet of incitement and hatred and glorification of terrorism in the education system and in their media, which is funded by European taxpayers' money. Surely that is not preparing the grassroots for peace with Israel.
That's the least to say, and it's not only about the TV program. It's, the Palestinian Authority, they have a ministry called the Ministry for Prisoners. This ministry, which is receiving a lot of money, mainly from Europe, which is the first financial supporter of Palestinian Authority, they are rewarding terrorists. According to the number of casualties, the number of killed people or hurt people, they received a monthly salary, which goes from 350 euros a month to 3,000 euros a month. For instance, last week in Manchester, the terrorist Abedi, who exploded himself, killing more than 20 people, most of them kids. According to the criteria of the Palestinian Ministry of Prisoners, he would receive, actually his family would receive 3,000 euro a month, which it sounds crazy. It's unthinkable in Europe. It happens in Ramallah. So when you have this ideology, this tradition of nightmare, this tradition of killings, this tradition of bloodshed, it's very difficult to go out from this vicious circle to enter the virtuous circle. So I think that this leadership will not be able, like Yasser Arafat wasn't able to follow the path of peace. I don't think that Mahmoud Abbas will be able to do this. Hopefully, maybe the next generation. But knowing the fact that this generation is fed with anti-Semitic, anti-Christian, anti-Western, daily indoctrination, it will be very difficult. And actually, I'm not very confident for the near or next future in the region. So Israel has to be strong. Israel has to go on to try to find partner for peace. Indeed, as you said, I think that the Arab pressure on the Palestinian side would be very important. I think that the Gulf state, because of Iran, that the Gulf state, that the Sunni world in general, it's looking to have closer relation with Israel. Maybe this should be used to put pressure on the Palestinian side. But even if tomorrow there is a peace agreement, it won't mean that it will be the end of the conflict. I think that it will open the way to 1, 2, 3, 4 wars between two countries, Israel and Palestine. And at the end of the day, when the Palestinian side will understand that they are not strong enough to defeat Israel, maybe then they will say, okay, we will not be able to defeat them. Let's try to work with them, and let's try to, instead of trying to destroy the dreams of the Israeli side, let's try to focus on the dream of the Palestinian side. And when they will care more about their kids, taking care of their kids, than killing the Israeli kids, maybe then it will be the beginning of the process of a real peace. Not a peace between two leaders, two heads of state, but a peace between two people.
Yeah. And Anders, we're less than 6 minutes of the programme, so if you can stay with us, really appreciate that. I do want your opinion, because in terms of how the EU should approach this conflict, what measures and policies should the EU put in place to secure a genuine peace rather than an artificial peace?
I think the first rule in this situation is not to create any more damage that is already there, and that is what Europe do right now. We are seeing European funds go to activities as described right before. We are seeing a lot of so-called different European peace initiatives basically just shooting in the blank. They don't know what they're doing. You know, foreign ministers from every country of Europe have their own peace plan for the Middle East in that drawer. So I think the best thing Europe can do here now is actually to disengage a little bit, because we are clearly not doing something positive. So let's look into the funding. Let's make sure that this funding is not going to terrorist activities, to terrorist appraisals, to the prisoners. Let's stop all the time coming up with new ideas and new unilateral steps. Let's try to do this in the right way. And then in Europe, let's be honest, the Americans have the pull in this situation. It's not the Europeans who are going to lead this situation. So let's for once recognize that we need to work with the Americans if we want to do something. And right now it's the Trump administration, and it's a bit childish in this European Union that we are more reluctant to talk to the democratic elected representative of our greatest ally, the country that saved Europe twice from despots in the last century, than we are to talk with the Chinese communist regime or dictators all around the world. That is the crazy situation in Europe right now. So I think we need maybe a check of realism and try to get a little bit back on track and recognize that we need to work with the Americans in this.
Absolutely. And Tomas, in terms of what Donald Trump is putting forward on the table, can you just clarify how different his policies are to his predecessors, President Obama, in trying to deal with this very intractable conflict, which is known as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
I think if you listen to Israelis after his first visit, from most people you get the sense that here is someone that may be unpredictable, he may be unconventional, but he's someone who likes us. They will even talk about love. He say, this guy, he loves us. And I happen to know from our work at the United Nations from some 5 years back, through some contacts, we knew people around Donald Trump, and we invited him to an event, a luncheon we did on Jerusalem, and he tentatively accepted the invitation. So we know that he's always been a friend of the Jewish people. He's always been a friend of a strong Israel, state of Israel. So I don't think anyone should doubt his intentions. So I think the first and maybe the most important change that he's bringing to the equation is that here they see someone that they know he genuinely cares for the Jewish people. And what makes the equation interesting is exactly as I think you said, that also the Arabs and the Gulf states, they understand this type of language. And because of it, I think there are new doors open that were not there while Obama was still in office. Obviously, this is a very complex issue, and we could sit for many hours and go into some of the details. But I'm just also to say it's very nice to hear what you are bringing forward to the table here, and if we'd have more members of Parliament here as you, I think we'd be on a much better place right now. So
absolutely. And Joel, within the last 2 minutes of the programme, I really have to ask you, surely one of the big sticking points of creating peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians is the Palestinian Authority's refusal to recognise Israel as a Jewish state. Surely that should be a prior condition prior to talks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It should be, and they are not ready to do it. And until they will be ready, all those peace talks will just be blah blah. So it will be useless. And I think it should be not a precondition, because they should negotiate. They should start the negotiation right now without any precondition. But during the talks, if they are really serious, they will agree on this point. If not, it will be a signal to understand that they are not ready to engage seriously on the path of peace. But again, I don't think that Mahmoud Abbas will be able to do this.
And Anders, in 30 seconds, how can our viewers get behind you? Because you are clearly a voice of reason in this European Parliament, talking sense, and we need more MEPs like yourself.
I think it's very important in the European Parliament internal power struggles to put pressure on the EPP. We have very good people in the EPP on Israel, but sometimes they are outvoted by less good people. So I will say EPP and ECR together can do a lot to moderate the situation in the European Parliament, but we need the EPP to stand with us.
Excellent. Gentlemen, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest on today's European report. And I just want to thank you for watching today's programme here in the European Parliament, in the heart of the European Union. And it's important that we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And I just want to thank you for watching today's programme.